So what central bank did when they realized this COVID crisis came, the first thing which is very important from central bank perspective is the policy rate cut. So everybody started working on the policy rate cut. Most of the central bank did this policy rate cut. So basically what happens, the central banks, so lower interest rate tend to rise asset prices, as I told, the inverse relationship, make the credit more affordable and increase the credit worthiness of the borrower. So this is theoretical knowledge of central banker that if I reduce the interest rate, my asset price will go up. And if the asset price goes up, then the portfolio of the bankers who are invested or corporate who have invested in this asset, their portfolio will go up because they will do mark to market and the credit worthiness will go up. But in the real world, it didn't happen, or many times it doesn't happen. For two things. One, and one of the example which you always know that Europe, and most of the time in 2008, after 2008, the interest rates were was on the lower side, was very low, especially in the Europe and all, which was almost negative. Uh, so obviously the cutting down of the interest does didn't work much in favor. And second thing also, if you go to countries like African countries or where the markets are not very developed, the term structure doesn't work so efficient. So if you do a price cut, let's say if you do a repo rate cut or a bank rate cut, and intention of the central bankers are that once I do reduce this, the other interest rates which are there available in the economy should also go down. But if there's no term structure, if there's no linkages of the interest rates of different tenures or different products, then this policy doesn't work. So it fails, or it will work with a lag, quite a bit of lag. So keep that in mind. Of the point which I'm trying to bring home here is that the success of policy rate cuts comes either comes with a lag, or sometimes it doesn't happen also. So that's we need to keep into mind. And as I said, in Europe and other places where the interest rates were pretty low, cutting down the policy rates were not very successful. And as we have read, many big central bankers, they have always said that there's not much policy space for conventional tools like policy rate cuts and so. So this is the first thing. All central bank tried. None of the central banks increased the rates at this during COVID time. They have all tried this, but the impacts were some places were successful, some places were not successful. So that was the first thing. So what are the other thing they have done? Obviously, majorly the big central bankers, they always did, and even the small central bankers also did that broad asset purchase program. So they started buying bonds, which I was talking about open market operation. So if I can map the theoretical concept, when I talked about discount rate, and you can map the discount rate with the policy cut. Then I talked about open market operation, and you can map that with a broad asset purchase program. So what is it? Here, basically, asset purchases are out of lower yields, and the yields are on the lower side. So, combination of local supply and duration and signaling effects. That's more important. I'll talk about the signaling effect. So, they started buying bonds. So, most of the central banks started buying bonds, and this is not in COVID. ECB, Fed, they have all done from 2008 onwards. They just started buying bonds so that inject liquidity into the system. And if their liquidity goes into the system, so the yields will be on the lower side, credit easiness can be on the higher side. But along with this, what they also did, they signal various things. What is one of the signaling effect is central bank announces well in advance that I want to buy these are the bonds in next 3 months, next 6 months. That signaling effect also plays a major role in the banks, commercial banks portfolio or the investors, because the central bank will buy it. So obviously they'll try to accumulate those to sell it to central banks. So that sets a signaling effect, and automatically it will have an impact on the yield. So one is the actual purchase of the bond, and other one is the signaling effect, which should be kept in mind, because whenever we look into this, we are not only trying to intervene in the market by today's market, but also we try to intervene in the market for the future. So one purchase and one press release of central bank can have two repercussions. So whatever central bank says, or whatever central bank governor says, there are a lot of things which comes out from the governor's speech, which people which generally people try to understand in a big way. Big governance speech gives a lot of signals, and then the market acts on that perspective. So here in this case, the second tool was that they started buying a lot of bonds. So now when they start buying a lot of bonds, Vandita, I have time, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah. So when they start buying bonds, so what has happened in this case that they started with the government securities. First layer of purchase was government securities. They started buying a lot of government securities and inject liquidity. But generally, the government bonds are purchased and kept by the banks. It doesn't have the real retail impacts. It does not have a non-banking impact. So what central banks, other central banks, this was the first one was started by Bank of Japan and then followed by ECB, European Central Bank. They started buying not only the first the government bonds, but slowly other bonds. So they went to commercial paper, they started buying corporate bonds, they started buying exchange rate funds, they started buying real estate investors, REITs. Why? Because then the money supply injection can be directly to those corporates, non-banking entities, and even to some extent retail segments can be there, can be injected. So here the intention was not only to, because sometimes what happens, if I buy bond from a bank, the bank gets the money supply. The bank, if the manager or the owner of the bank is not very risk taker, he may not give that credit. And central bank many times cannot push the central bank, commercial banks to give credit. It can make the platform by reducing interest rate. It can signal things, but it cannot push in open market economy, like especially like US, UK, whether there's no, you cannot push, you can do moral suasion, but you cannot push the central commercial bank to give loan officially. So that's why it was basically then they said, if I inject the money only in commercial banks and if they don't sell this thing or they don't give credit, then the policy doesn't work. So then that's why they extended the policy of purchasing bonds from government bonds to corporate bonds to exchange rates. So various instruments they started buying except the equity. Equities didn't buy so much, but some of the central banks also went to that extent to buy equity. And when they buy this thing, what is happening, you should understand that when they buy this thing, the balance sheet of the central bank is getting bigger and bigger every day because they're buying it, and then they'll be, when the things come, they will be selling it in due course of time. But now it was basically the broad asset purchase programs which was done.